Close your eyes for a moment and picture it. A quiet suburban street just beginning to wake. The sun barely up. The glow of a tiny black and white television flickering in a dark lounge room. The smell of your dad's Winfield Blues drifting in from the back porch, mixing with the early morning air. Somewhere outside, a group of kids is yelling because someone's just stacked it on the footpath, scraped their knee, and nobody's mom is watching. No one's panicking. No one's calling an ambulance. It's just part of the day. That was the 1970s. A decade caught awkwardly between the old world and the new. A time when decimal currencies still felt strange in your pocket, when cars didn't always have seatbelts, but somehow everyone believed they'd be fine. A time when childhood meant a kind of freedom that would probably get your parents arrested today. If you grew up in 1970s Australia, you lived through something that simply doesn't exist anymore. And it wasn't just the fashion or the music. Though, let's be honest, the flared pants and mullets were unforgettable. It was the everyday stuff. The rhythms of life. The unspoken rules. The way things just worked without anyone overthinking them. The 70s weren't the neat, buttoned-up 50s or the wide-eyed innocence of the 60s. They were rough around the edges. A little dodgy. Deeply practical. And somehow, despite all of that, completely magical. This was a decade where you learned things by doing them, where mistakes were lessons, and where community wasn't a buzzword, it was survival. So today, we're diving into 15 memories you'll only truly understand if you grew up in 1970s Australia. Not the big historical moments you read about in textbooks, but the small things. The everyday details that shaped your childhood. The moments that quietly turned you into who you are now. Things you struggle to explain to anyone who wasn't there. So buckle up, mate. We're going back. Saturday morning cartoons started at exactly 6 o'clock. And that time mattered. Saturday morning wasn't just another morning. It was sacred. You'd wake before the sun, slip quietly out of bed while your parents were still asleep, and creep into the lounge room like a burglar on a mission. The TV would flick on with that soft hum and glow, and right on 6 o'clock, the cartoons would begin. Bugs Bunny, The Jetsons, Scooby-Doo, Speed Racer, grainy images dancing across the screen of a small black and white television. You'd sit there in your pajamas, way too close to the screen, volume turned down low so you didn't wake the house. A bowl of cereal balanced in your lap, milk already going a bit soggy because you were too absorbed to notice. If you were lucky, your family upgraded to color TV sometime in the mid-70s, and suddenly everything felt brighter, bigger, more exciting. Saturday mornings were never the same again. There were no streaming services. No catch-up TV. No on-demand anything. If you missed it, it was gone. That was it. You had to be there. Sitting on the shag carpet. Fully present. The ads were part of the magic too. Toys you'd never get, breakfast cereals packed with sugar, all sold in that overly enthusiastic voice that made everything sound like the best thing you'd ever see in your life. By 9 or 10, the cartoons ended, and the spell was broken. Time to go outside. But those few hours? They belong to you. Pure, uninterrupted magic. Kids today have endless content at their fingertips, but they'll never know the thrill of racing to the lounge room at 6 in the morning, knowing you had exactly 3 hours before it all disappeared. Every Australian dad in the 70s had a stubby holder collection. Foam rubber, sometimes neoprene if he was fancy, branded with beer logos, footy teams, trot-eye businesses, and pubs you'd never heard of. They were everywhere. On the kitchen bench. In the shed. In the boot of the car. VB2s. Carlton Draft. XXXX if you were in Queensland. Your dad's stubby holder was as essential as his wallet. He'd crack a cold one after work, slide the bottle into its foam jacket, and settle back like the day was officially over. It kept the beer cold, kept his hand dry, and somehow became a symbol of Australian masculinity. Blokes swapped them, collected them, and argued endlessly over which brand was best, based purely on the quality of the holder. Barbecues, cricket matches, fishing trips, stubby holders were everywhere. A man without one just didn't look right. They were simple, practical, and effective. No batteries. No technology. Just foam doing its job. These days people drink out of stainless steel contraptions or straight from the bottle, but back then, the stubby holder had swagger. Your dad's collection told a story, where he'd been, what he drank, who he was. And if you were lucky, he'd let you use one for your soft drink, and you'd feel like a king. If you grew up in the 70s, your childhood was lived outside. After breakfast, your mum would shove you out the door, and that was it. Be back when the street lights come on. No phones. No tracking apps. No constant check-ins. You were just gone. Roaming the neighborhood with a pack of other kids, making your own fun. You played cricket in the middle of the road, moving aside when a car came through. You built bike ramps out of scrap wood. Raced down hills without helmets. Climbed trees that were definitely too high. Someone always fell. Blood was drawn. Tears happened. Then you got back up and kept going. That was life. The street light rule was law. When those lights flickered on at dusk, you knew it was time to head home. You'd wander back dirty, sweaty, probably bleeding from somewhere. Dinner would be ready. Your mum didn't ask what you'd been doing. She didn't need to know. You were a kid. You were playing. That was enough. Today, kids have supervised playdates and structured activities. Letting a 7-year-old roam the streets until dark would get child services called. We traded freedom for safety. And maybe that was necessary. But if you grew up in the 70s, you know what we lost: independence, confidence, and the feeling of being truly free. February 14, 1966, the day Australia switched from pounds, shillings, and pence to dollars and cents. But if you were a kid in the early 70s, you were still living with the aftermath. Grandparents talked in pounds. Shops had conversion charts on the wall. Adults muttered, trying to work out if they were being ripped off. For kids learning money, it was chaos. You handed over coins hoping it was enough, trusting the shopkeeper because you sure couldn't do the maths. But it marked the 70s as a decade of transition. Australia modernizing. Moving on. Adults complained. Kids adapted. By mid-decade it felt normal. $1 bought lunch. 20 cents bought lollies. And the country just carried on. Looking back, it's wild how smoothly it happened. Today it would cause outrage and conspiracy theories. But in the 70s, Australians just got on with it. Every day at primary school, someone wheeled out the milk crate. Tiny glass bottles with foil tops. In summer, the milk was warm and slightly off. In winter, it was freezing cold. You drank it anyway. Free school milk. No choices. No alternatives. You got your bottle, and that was that. Some kids loved it. Others gagged it down. The lucky ones had friends who took it off their hands. The program ended in 1973, but if you were there, you remember it. The clink of glass. The smell. The shared suffering. And somehow we all survived. The family car in the 1970s was almost always a station wagon. A Holden Kingswood. A Ford Falcon. Big, boxy, solid machines built like they were meant to survive the apocalypse. And in the back seat, nothing. No seatbelts. No child restraints. No booster seats. You and your siblings would pile in, sliding across the vinyl bench seat, rolling into each other every time your dad took a corner too fast. Long trips were an adventure. You'd lie down in the cargo area, staring up at the roof, or sit in the rear-facing third row, waving at the cars behind you like a celebrity. Kids climbed over seats, fought, laughed, stuck their heads out the window. If your dad braked suddenly, you went flying. It was reckless. It was dangerous. And it was completely normal. Seatbelts were becoming mandatory in the early 70s, but enforcement was loose and attitudes were casual. It felt like unnecessary government interference. Looking back, it's astonishing any of us survived. The road toll was brutal. Accidents that would be minor today were often fatal. But at the time, we didn't know any better. We just lived. That station wagon represents something deeper now, not just danger, but innocence. We didn't understand the risks. And in that ignorance, there was a strange kind of freedom. Photography in the 70s required patience. You had a camera, probably a basic 35 millimeters, loaded with a roll of film that gave you 24 or 36 shots if you were lucky. Every photo mattered. You didn't take 10 pictures of the same thing. You framed it carefully, held your breath, clicked once, and hoped for the best. When the roll was finished, you took it to the chemist. They sent it away. And then you waited. A week. Sometimes two. No previews. No idea if the photos even worked. When the envelope finally came back, it felt like Christmas. You ripped it open, heart racing. Some photos were perfect. Others blurry. Overexposed. Someone's head cut off. But they were real. Physical. You put them in albums. You wrote captions. You showed them to visitors. Today, we take hundreds of photos a day and forget them instantly. They live on phones and clouds, rarely printed, rarely treasured. But in the 70s, photos mattered because they were scarce. Waiting was part of the magic. And when they arrived, they were priceless. The local milk bar was the center of your universe. A small shop, usually family-run, stocked with essentials, bread, milk, newspapers, and the real prize, lollies. Behind the counter stood rows of glass jars filled with every sweet imaginable. Musk sticks, milk bottles, red frogs, jelly beans, fantails, cobbers. You'd point to what you wanted, and the shopkeeper would scoop them into a white paper bag, weigh them, and tell you the price. 20 cents could get you a fortune. The shopkeeper knew you, knew your parents, might let you run a tab if times were tight. Kids gathered outside, sitting on the gutter, trading lollies like currency. 2 musk sticks for a cobber. A red frog for a milk bottle. It was social, human, personal. Today, milk bars are mostly gone, replaced by servos and convenience stores with prepackaged everything. If you grew up in the 70s, you remember the sound of coins in your pocket and the way the shopkeeper greeted you by name. That world has vanished. If your family had a phone in the early 70s, there's a good chance it was a party line. That meant you shared the line with another household. Sometimes two. You picked up the receiver and could hear your neighbor mid-conversation. Privacy didn't exist. You waited your turn. Or, if you were curious, and everyone was, you listened in for a moment. Just to hear the gossip. Mid-call, you'd hear a click and know someone else had picked up. Conversations paused. Voices lowered. Everyone pretended nothing was happening. Party lines were cheap and practical, but deeply awkward. They forced a strange kind of community. By the mid-70s, private lines became common and party lines faded away. But if you remember them, you remember the weirdness. The lack of privacy. The unspoken rules. We shared because we had to. And we got on with it. Summer in the 70s meant one thing. The local pool. You'd spend entire days there. From opening to closing. Swimming until your fingers were wrinkled and your eyes burned from chlorine. No sunscreen. No hats. Nobody cared. You baked in the sun, came home red as a lobster, peeled for days, and did it all again next weekend. The pool was a social hub. Bombs off the diving board. Races. Paddle pops from the kiosk. Sitting on scorching concrete. Slip, slop, slap didn't arrive until 1980, and even then, it took years to catch on. We didn't know about melanoma. We didn't think about UV damage. We were just kids. Now we know better. And Australia pays the price. But if you grew up in the 70s, you remember that endless summer freedom. No one hovering, no lectures, just water, heat, and joy. In the 70s, there were only 3 TV channels. 7, 9, 10. That was it. You watched what was on or you didn't watch TV at all. And because everyone had the same options, everyone watched the same shows. Countdown on Friday nights. The Sullivans. Homicide. Variety shows. Movies on Saturday night. If you missed an episode, it was gone forever. No recording. No replay. You fiddled with the antenna if the reception was bad. When TV ended at midnight with the test pattern, that was it. Time for bed. On Monday morning, everyone at school talked about the same shows. Shared jokes. Shared moments. Today, everyone watches something different, alone, on their own screen. We've gained freedom, but lost shared culture. Saturday mornings had a soundtrack, the Victor lawn mower. That high-pitched 2-stroke scream echoed through every suburb. One dad started mowing, and suddenly every dad was out there, creating a suburban symphony. The Victor was Australian-made, loud, smoky, and indestructible. Your dad yanked the cord, swore loudly, then finally got it going. Kids were recruited to help. Raking. Carrying clippings. grass sticking to your sweaty legs. It was itchy, hot, annoying, and completely normal. Today, lawns are mowed by robots or gardeners. But the victor was the sound of the weekend. The smell of cut grass and two-stroke oil. If you grew up then, you can still hear it. Money was tight in the 70s. And the corner store understood that. If the shopkeeper knew your family, you could run a tab. They wrote it in a little book. You paid later. No contracts. No interest. Just trust. Kids were sent with notes. Put it on the account. And it worked. Reputation mattered. People paid their debts because community demanded it. Today, credit is corporate and impersonal. Back then, it was human. If you were 6 years old in the 70s, you probably caught the bus to school alone. Maybe your mum walked you the first week. After that, you were on your own. The bus driver kept an eye out. Older kids helped younger ones. You learned independence early. Missed your stop? You figured it out. Lost your fare? You asked. It built resilience. Today, that would be unthinkable. But it shaped a generation that knew how to handle the world. Every summer, they came. Christmas beetles. Green and gold. Buzzing around street lights. Crunching underfoot. Kids caught them in jars, watched them crawl, then let them go. They marked the season. Holidays. Freedom. Christmas approaching. Today, their numbers are declining. Habitat loss. Climate change. Kids might see a few, but they'll never know the swarms. If you grew up in the 70s, you remember the buzz, the crunch, the magic. 15 memories. 15 pieces of a decade that shaped a generation. The 1970s weren't perfect. Plenty of things were dangerous. But life was simpler. Not easier, simpler. We had less, but it was enough. Community mattered. Trust mattered. Kids were tougher because they had to be. We've gained safety, technology, awareness. But we've lost freedom, patience, shared experience. The 70s taught us resilience, independence, joy in simple things. And for those who lived it, those lessons stayed. So which memory hit you hardest? Which one made you smile? Break. Share it. These memories matter. They're not just history. They're who we used to be. This has been Retro Australia, where the past isn't just remembered. It's still alive.